everybody, it's Alicia. I recently listened to an audiobook of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, and I hadn't read the book in a long time, and so I wanted to share my thoughts on it with you guys. Um, wow. Erik is just as awesome of a character as I remember him, and hearing his story again, it got me thinking there really needs to be an adaptation that does him justice. I mean, the closest film version that we still have, I'm sorry, I have no script for this, so I'm just, rambling with my thoughts, but the closest film version that we have that does Erik justice, I think, is still the original silent film with Lon Chaney. All the other versions, they either take the basic premise of disfigured guy and, is kind of crazy and he lusts after a girl and he lives beneath some sort of building and that's pretty much it. Not to say that there aren't great variations on that, like Phantom of the Paradise is one of the funniest cheesy 70s movies I've ever seen in my life. And it has its moments of pathos too, but yeah, it's a great, if you're a fan of cheesy 70s movies, especially musicals, watch Phantom of the Paradise. It's awesome. The Max Shell version's really good, so I'm not, trashing any of the variations of the story, but as for Erik, the character of Erik, I think there needs to be a version that really does some justice, because in the book, you really see his human side. You really see that, yes, he does bad things. Yes, he murders people, and that shouldn't be glossed over. That shouldn't be written off as, oh, well, the world just doesn't understand him. No. In some situations, yes, Erik didn't have a choice. For instance, when he lived in Persia and the Shah was basically like, okay, entertain us by killing people or we're going to kill you. Or if Erik was doing it in what, in his eyes, was self-defense. For instance, defending his home, his house by the lake, But I'm sure there were other situations where Erik, harmed people or killed people where he didn't necessarily have to do that. So, his bad side, the darkness, the human, his reacting to certain situations. He doesn't always react in the best way, so that shouldn't be glossed over. But at the same time, on the flip side of that coin, he shouldn't be compared to Faust. I don't think Leroux ever meant for there to be a direct comparison between Faust and Erik. If anything, I think Erik has more in common with, say, Hades, the Greek myth of Hades and Persephone, or the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, those types of stories where the person who's underground, he's not the bad guy, he's not the devil, he's just, lives underground, is lonely, that type of thing. So Erik, he's not Faust, he's not, although you could make, if you're going to go with the Faustian element, I say do it as symbolically, where Erik, instead of learning to view himself as, I'm different, I look different, but that doesn't mean I'm deformed. That doesn't mean I'm ugly. I'm just different. Instead of learning that, he, inherits the role that society set for him. He learns to see himself as ugly because other people see him as ugly. And that's a purely psychological thing, where if he had been raised in a different time period or a different culture, where deformity isn't viewed as something ugly, or it's viewed as something different, where, because I mean, come on guys, let's give the great artist in the sky more credit for his or her or their, creativity. Just because, we see things as looking different doesn't mean they're ugly in, the creator's eyes, or nor should it be considered ugly in human eyes. It's just different. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, don't compare Erik to Faust. Don't compare him directly to the devil, because he isn't either of those things. He's human. He's neither black nor white. He's gray, as all humans are. So yeah, that's my little spiel on Erik. And the Persian is probably one of the best characters in the book. Daroga needs more love. There needs to be a version where it has the Persian, if not at least in it, like he is in the book, where a version that shows his backstory. Maybe not all the details, but shows him in Persia with Erik, or shows him going to India to get Erik, because they invent all these backstories for Erik in these different versions, and it's like, he kind of already has one that's pretty awesome as Leroux wrote it. I mean, not that I would want all of Erik's backstory filled in. I wouldn't want all the puzzle pieces filled in, because Erik seems like one of those characters where less is more. Where it's cool to have some details, but not everything, because he's kind of like, in the sense where he's like Merlin, or a character like that, where he's important to the story, but we shouldn't know everything about him, because that part of the appeal of him is his mysteriousness. Like, where does he come from? We don't know. What has he been through before in his life to get him to this certain point, or to get him to this certain psychological state? We may not have all the details, nor should we. So yeah, that's my take on the book, just off the top of my head, after not having read it for a long time. Erik can be a great avatar for the others of society, and he's a great element to show that there is darkness to society's prejudices, and you can't, take an innocent child from the cradle, and whether deliberately or, without malicious intent, but just from how society's structured, you can't teach them, you're ugly, you're ugly, you're ugly, without having it have some psychological consequences. Not every person who's treated like that is going to end up like Quasimodo, where he is good and still sees the goodness in himself and humanity in spite of that. Or he's not going to be like Gwynplaine, where he sees that society has these prejudices, he sees the world sucks, but he doesn't blame them for their hatred. He doesn't blame them for, seeing certain things as ugly and, class issues and things like that. So yeah, I think Erik's a good, and not even just with the darker side of things, but this is my take on Erik. I've always seen Erik as a great model for, just as seeing, I've been dealt a tough hand, a tough hand of cards. It sucks, it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to do my damnedest to try and live like everybody else. I'm going to build this house under the opera. I'm going to put regular chairs and regular tables and stuff in it and try and live as quote-unquote normally as possible, because I, as a human being, deserve that right. I deserve to be loved. I deserve affection. And that's, again, another thing why I don't like him being compared to the devil, because it's like, the devil was greedy and did bad things just because he could, and because he, felt entitled to things that weren't his. Erik is just asking for the same basic human decency as anybody else. Every human being deserves love. Every human being deserves kindness. Every human being deserves to be looked at as a human being, not as, looking at them just based on what they look like. And, because if you treat somebody like that, you constantly tell them you're ugly, it's going to end up being like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where Erik inherits, from childhood, inherits the role of the monster, because he's only been told that he's a monster, and he feels that there's no other way out other than to be the monster. That's where I feel he's even more pitiful than, say, a character like Frankenstein's creature, whereas Frankenstein's creature, to me, felt like he was doing the bad things he did just despite his creator and despite the world, whereas Erik, to me, felt like, from his point of view, he felt like he didn't have a choice. So, that was exhausting. I'm getting kind of emotional here, just talking about Erik and just imagining all the things he went through and how his story really hasn't been told yet, at least in the way I think Leroux meant for it to be told, and the way I feel Erik. Maybe I need to get back to that Phantom novel that I was writing for those of you who haven't been following me for long, I started writing a novel inspired by Phantom years ago, and I haven't touched it in a long time because I went off to college and got, busy with other things and stuff. But I really should get back to it. And for those of you who are like, oh, fan fiction, that's stealing, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, why don't then you bitch about fan art? Because fan art's the same thing. In my opinion, as long as you give credit where credit's due, it's like a bit like a bibliography for when you write an essay. Give credit where credit's due, and you should be able to use the source, and to take inspiration from other. That's what artists are, we inspire each other and things like that. And we should be able to, use each other's ideas as springboards and be inspired and share stories, So, anyway, those are my thoughts on Phantom. Off the top of my head, it's a wonderfully tragic story that needs to be really told and looked at in different ways. So, yeah, I'd love to discuss more with you guys. So, I'd love to start a discussion in the comments. So, leave your comments, your thoughts. Let me know if you think you'd like, a film version or a stage play or a novel. Based on my ideas, I may, get to work on that and share it with you guys. So, yeah, from one fan to another, love you guys, love the story of Erik, and yeah, peace.